We can give everybody till 5 after.
What's that?
We can give everybody till 5 after, right?
Yeah. I know that we're gonna be missing like one student or family member because of the days. A couple are sick.
And Paula's not here. Oh, Erica just brought me a box of things left over from the first trips that she was on. I didn't look to see what they were, but she was apparently cleaning out some of her files. And do you want this? Well, of course I do. So we'll see. And it is the first really nice day we've had. It could be very tempting to. Hello.
Where my office is, it's so warm inside.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My office where my computer is always cold, cold, cold. So I go outside and like, oh, what happened here? I have to take off all my sweaters. So. Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming back. So a quick recap of last week. We were talking about, oh, I'm falling down. Yeah. Falling down in my competency here. Getting relaxed. It's coming, I go. Yeah. Sorry. I can see what I'm talking about. There we go. Okay. So quick recap of last week. We were talking about development and education and the importance of a quality education, not just an education, because we needed a quality education to offer the skills and the confidence that the women needed to be able to run their own business. So here I have a stakeholders map, which was drawn by the gal who's the creative director for Maya Mom Weavers in the States, because she said I needed it in order to show you all these interrelationships. And I actually like this stakeholders map to show you how I relate to the various pieces we're talking about. And I will use this next week when we're talking about the challenges of making the whole project go without me one day. So for many years, no matter how many times I told the women that I wasn't the owner of the business, but they were the owners of the business, they never believed me. So it's not really that hard to understand because I was the one making all the decisions. I was the one that decided we were going to market in the North American market. I decided we were going to use the foot loom. I decided when we were going to use industrial sewing machines. I was responsible for sourcing all the materials. So it really wasn't that surprising. And because of the years of experience I had in business, I just went merrily about my business, making decisions and doing things and not really talking about anything. So my first step in stepping away from the business, as you heard, was giving the responsibility for different tasks to different women as coordinators. And then, excuse me, in 2018, when we formed the Sales and Marketing Council, that was really the inflection point to start this process of me becoming a customer instead of being the owner. The process for training the coordinators was really a matter of me trying to see what was inside my head, how I did something, getting it out of my head, getting it organized, and then documenting so the women could learn to do the work that I had done in my head. And I have to say that when they did it, they ended up doing it in their own way. So it was a way that really worked for them. Some of the procedures I started still continue. Some of them have been discarded, and many of them have been improved. So they use paper to document what they're doing, but they have been doing it in a way that made sense to them. And because I am just one person and I was only there for 2 weeks of every month, now that the women are responsible for things, they do a much better job than I did of getting things done. So also in 2018, the organization, the Guatemalan nonprofit called Fundap, that I talked a little bit about before, began to work with us. So they brought the women some excellent training in administrative and business skills, and they've been really helpful to Grupo Kahala in legal and organizational issues. But because they are funded by another organization, and so they have to sometimes work on their projects on a funder's timetable instead of ours. So I have accused them to myself of we're their beneficiaries, but sometimes I feel like we're their victims. So part of their responsibility was to help in sales and marketing. So that's good. They got the women involved in different markets outside of our community. And then an issue I have with them is I don't think they have good commercial sense. So they had a couple of trainings in new product development. And I thought it was a good idea for the women to be going through those steps of a new product development. However, they skipped the part that's very important of looking at the market to see if there's a need for that product. And because they were working according to their funder's timetable of the project they were funded for, in this particular training, what they ended up doing is taking those new products with the women to Antigua, which is a very important market for us, but the product samples they took weren't well done. They weren't really finished right. And so that wasn't really a good use of anybody's time. Fortunately, the women brought along some products that they currently were making, and so they did meet people that had some interest in their products. But on the whole, they have, the weavers and Grupo Kahala have benefited from the Fundap relationship. So we're in 2023, we're in the third year of the second set of projects, and I think this is going to be the end of it. And so I am grateful to their help, and now it's going to be over. So we were merrily going along until COVID hit, to our amazement and to shock. So I left Kaho'ula one day in February 2020, and then I didn't go back for 14 months until April of 2021. So I'm very proud of how Grupo Kaho'ula handled COVID. First of all, everything closed down because the government ordered it to. But with the assistance of the local health center, we were able, or they were able to get some things moving. And first they started with educating the people in the group about what the disease was and about the need for wearing masks. Then, pretty soon after that shutdown, with the agreement of the health center, our weavers started to work again. But they started to work on a half-day basis. So half the women would work in the morning and the other half would work in the afternoon, so they could keep social distancing, and they did all wear masks. In the rest of Grupo Kaho'ula, we first closed down the Helping with Homework program right away. The preschool also closed down right away, but the preschool teachers started a program of visiting all their students one by one, bringing them activities, because they were concerned that the children, without going to the school, were going to lose part of their development process. They did this a few rounds, and then those exhausted teachers decided what they would do is invite the mothers with their children to the school one at a time to have those activities. The universities switched to virtual education, so our scholarship program continued. The public schools switched to virtual programs. But in Kaho'ula, that's not a very good thing, because a very tiny group of people in the community have computers in their homes. And so those virtual classes were not worth anything at all. So so the public schools did offer the parents food for the family during the pandemic, but when parents asked the public school for homework, they wouldn't give them any homework. So those kids really lost a lot of time in school. Then in 2022, the public school system started back on a 50-50 basis. So the kids would go one day and they wouldn't go the other day. And it wasn't until this year, 2023, that the school has come back to normal. So for the weaving cooperative, their production was cut nearly in half. And at the same time, in the United States, our business was booming, because if you remember, during the beginning of COVID, everybody switched their shopping to online. We already had a website that was functional and attractive, and so we began to have more sales. So while the weavers were having less production, we were having more sales. So they couldn't keep up with us. And COVID was actually the trigger that changed my relationship from being the owner to being their biggest customer. So first, when it happened, we kept in communication. First, we started with Zoom, and then we switched to WhatsApp. And even though a virtual relationship is not as good as in person, it still helped us get through all of that time. And actually, the WhatsApp technology has really helped the weavers a lot. For example, they've set up their coordinators as a group, so they have a way to easily stay in touch with each other all the time. I returned to Kaho'ula in April of 2021 after 14 months. And in those 14 months, a lot of changes had happened. So I had taken all the day-to-day work that I used to do before the pandemic, that I used to do in Kaho'ula. Either I had delegated it to someone there, or I had brought it to the States. So when I arrived in Kaho'ula that April, my whole role had totally changed. And so I moved my office. I closed my office where I had in the headquarters, and I went to the room that I lived in, and I set up a home office. And my relationship did change then. So I wasn't a part of day-to-day work. I was there to be the customer of the weaving cooperative, and I was there to be the consultant or the advisor to Grupo Cajola. So I would have meetings with people and find out how things were going, help them with problem solving, pretty much just being a consultant. But it was a really big change for me. So now, when I visited in January of 2022, my mom in the States had come off of a really big selling season before the holidays that year. We had participated in a lot of outdoor markets, and so the sales were great, but you remember the production is down. And so I was really stressed about not having enough inventory. And I asked to the women, okay, what are we going to do? On top of that, the footloom weavers, some of the women that were weaving had withdrawn from the group, and not as many weavers had joined the group. And so we were short on fabric. And on top of that, the Pulsera project people, who were, before the pandemic, our largest customer, came back and gave us an order for 8,000 bags. So those bags, we buy the fabric from a community that specializes in that fabric, but the seamstresses sew it and cut it out and sew it. And so how were we going to satisfy all of that demand? So the women had the idea that we could ask other cooperatives to help us out with the production. So the first one they asked was a co-op, a sewing co-op in the town next to us, San Juan Calco, because they had been socializing with them for a few years and comparing notes and seeing how each other worked. But now they asked them if they could do some sewing, and they agreed. Then Fundap introduced them to a cooperative that also did sewing and weaving. When I went back in April, it was timed when the women, the Tejedores Maya Mom, was going to go to meet the women of this other co-op, which is called Ademve, which is in Chichicastenango, a couple of hours away. So we went for the meeting, and the meeting went very, very well. The women from Ademve were confident they could sew to the quality that we needed, and the women from Tejedores Maya Mom were confident that they had high enough quality standards to do that. In the car on the way back to Cajola, I was doing some rough calculations about this order for 8,000 bags. And I said, oh my goodness, you're going to have to work from now until the end of the year just to get these bags done. And we're going to need Ademve to do all the production for the Maya Mom Weavers products and for your other customers' products. And so that's what we did. So I made up a schedule of what products they should outsource to Ademve in what order based on the priorities of my inventory in the United States. And so Celia, the new products development coordinator, started to go up every month and teach the women 4 new products. And then the next month they would work on those products. And that's how that process just kept going. And so by the end of 2022, they had produced the products that we needed. In addition, Fundap connected us with a footlooming cooperative that's about 45 minutes away. And so between the cooperatives we were all working with, then they were able to satisfy the production needs in the United States, well, that I needed and that Pulsar Project needed and that their customers really needed. So by the time 2022 came around, we were in good shape inventory-wise. And in the process, the women had learned new skills because in order to be outsourcing all these products, they needed to know how to do advanced production planning. They needed to do advanced cash planning. They needed to have a system of materials because the system was to take what they needed. For example, for sewing, they would have to take the fabric and zippers or whatever else they needed to the other. So there was a lot of pre-planning that they had to get under their belt. Now our inventory is in great shape. However, in the early 2022, the sales in the United States started to level off. And I think it was because of the economic uncertainties, and we are still facing those economic uncertainties, and our sales in the States have not bounded back. And so when I went to Kavala, I told the women, so inventory system is great, but we're not drawing it down as fast as we used to. And so our orders aren't going to be that big this year. But the women didn't panic because they have been developing the Guatemala market since we started their council in 2018. And although the pandemic shut down the small businesses in Guatemala, little by little, they've been coming back. So in the last months, they've been getting sales orders from the customers they used to sell to. So little by little, it's coming back. And of course, they're selling still in markets around Guatemala. They have some sales points in Quetzaltenango. They have some sales points in Antigua. So they're very enthusiastic about their own market. And I heard good news or interesting news last week is they're actually in a panic because their orders for the shawls that they weave are so high, they've had to scramble to reorganize the production schedule. But that's a very cool problem for them to have. So over the past couple of years, the Sales and Marketing Council has changed a little bit. It used to be the team of coordinators plus representatives from each of the work groups, and they would meet every other week. Now they've changed into a system where they have coordinators meeting every week, but the amount of coordinators has increased. And what's really great about this is that it has increased the number of women in the cooperative who are making decisions. And so the teamwork in the co-op is growing, and the confidence in decision making is growing. When they have their monthly meetings of all of the women, I've had the opportunity to sit in on a couple of those. Each of the coordinators reports to everyone else what's going on in her particular end of the business, and then the finance coordinator gives all of the women an update on their cash flow, an update on how the business is doing. And so everybody is getting drawn into what is the basis of the business. So that's been for them a big transition from being workers to becoming actually the owners. So when I come as their major customer, and the work I do with them is developing of new products and working on quality issues, maybe having to redesign some of the specification forms. And then I'm always available to them for consulting on sales and marketing. That's my spiel for today. And next week, I agreed on using that photograph, by the way. Next week, I'm going to talk to you about the challenges that are ahead, because the real important goal is that everything that goes on in Kavala goes on fine without me. So I'm going to talk about those challenges. Any questions about today?
I'll just make a quick point. I thought it was really interesting when you brought up the idea that like the workers were like unsure of who was the boss, or that like they owned it. And I think that was like kind of almost like reminiscent of like Marx's ideology them into production, like how they would react. And then I would say that like in terms of decision making, yeah, like I think it's I don't know how you would prefer it be. Obviously, maybe it's just easier to just be like, this is the decision, or whether or not like they should have like a democratic way of picking the decisions. If maybe that would make them feel more like winners, or I don't know.
But, well, the problem was, as you know, remember, I have this ring of power, right? And plus, I wasn't busy involving them, right? And they were starting out with many of them without education. And so the people that started making it possible were those coordinators that came in, or the women that came in with education that could be coordinators. So I don't want to be the decision maker. That's not my goal. My goal is that they have their own independent business. It just turned out to be a longer process than I probably thought about. What I like a lot about their decision making is because of their cultural roots, they make it by consensus. So when they make decisions, like not decision about are we going to buy more zippers today, that can be made by, but when they make a decision about how things are going to happen, they make it by consensus. And what's funny, when I started to work with Grupo Cajolat in the States, we were talking about organizations and things like that, and we were talking about how do you make decisions, and they assured me they make it by voting. And I said, no, you don't make it by voting, because you guys get to consensus until everyone agrees, and then you vote. So it's not the same as voting, because voting has winners and losers. But they think they vote, but they didn't vote, but they didn't really vote, because they got to the decision before they put it to a vote. And so I like that. So I explained how when I was organizing the meetings, if they had to make a decision, that they would have to talk in their language to come to that consensus. And consensus, why people don't like it, is because it takes a long time. So you don't get to go like this. So, but I'm okay with that. I really do believe in the grassroots, that I want them to do it. I always did want to do them. So but that's my story. So, and yeah.
It sounded sort of like that. Maybe I didn't. I'm so sorry. I was a little bit late. Maybe it sounded a little bit like you were surprised when you went back that you were should it happen.
Well, it's not. I wasn't surprised. It's just it was a big change. Like it was a big change. So no, I went back with the idea of cleaning out my office.
Oh,
but
okay.
but that was like what? It's just a big deal, right? And I tell people, I'm really sincerely happy that it's all runs without me, but I'm sad because when I went every month, I was like a part of the community. Like I knew what was going on. Now when I go there, I don't even know who all the dogs are. So it's just different. It's like closing one door and opening another. Even though I still go to Cajolat, it's a different experience. So no, that's what I want. I want them to be independent. So. And now I want them to succeed more. Other comments, questions? Yeah.
How bad did COVID hit?
It hit it in several different ways, as in everybody was spooked by the idea. So people were afraid to get tested. They were afraid to get vaccinations when vaccinations became available. And then it's like a social shame. So nobody would ever admit that anybody got sick or died of it. The first wave that went through killed a lot of older, sick people. The second wave that went through killed more people. So over time, we lost one of the really important members of Grupo Cajolat, who was young, who was like 30 years old. So it did significantly damage the community. But the psychological part of it was really strange to watch. I think some of the evangelical churches were telling them if you got a vaccination, it was the devil's work or something like that. So there was a whole lot of, the things that happen when you have an ignorant population is you can be manipulated. So I think it was hard on them. I really do. Plus the shame thing. Plus, socially speaking, they do things as a group. So you never could get people to do social distancing in their family life or in, like, when, so when someone dies, everybody gathers. So even if that person died of COVID, everybody's still there gathering. And so it was really easy for it to spread around. So it would attack more than one person in a family. So I would say, I feel like it hit it pretty hard. Took out a lot of people. Especially because it takes out people that already have underlying, and we have huge problems with diabetes and things like that, and alcoholism, so, yeah. Other questions? All right. So I'll see you guys next week.